I never planned to shock my entire family during a dinner that was supposed to celebrate someone else. But there I was 28 years old, sitting quietly at the table while my stepmother smirked across the roast beef. "Still unemployed, Amber?" she asked, her voice loud enough to cut through the silverware. The room went silent. My father looked down. My cousin hid a smile. They had no idea what was coming. For 3 years, I'd built something they wouldn't understand, something I never told them about. Not out of spite, but because I knew they'd never believe in me unless I gave them no choice. That night, as the butler handed my father the latest issue of Fortune magazine, their eyes finally opened. My name wasn't just in the magazine, it was on the cover. And everything they thought they knew about me unraveled in a single-page turn. Growing up in the St. James household meant one thing: expectations. Expectations to succeed, to conform, to carry on a legacy that had been crafted over 3 generations. My father, Richard St. James, was the 3rd CEO of St. James Holdings, a conservative investment firm with deep ties to the East Coast elite. His second wife, Lorraine, had married into the family when I was 9 and wasted no time asserting her place as gatekeeper of the St. James reputation. From the outside, we were polished, perfect, a family that hosted charity galas, belonged to country clubs, and sent their children to Ivy League schools. Inside, there were cracks beneath the marble floors and china patterns. My mother, me, real mother, had been a brilliant artist, free-spirited and wild in all the ways that made my father nervous. After their divorce, she moved back to Portland, and I was shuffled into a world of tailored uniforms and formal dinners. Lorraine didn't exactly manage me, like a business acquisition that came with hidden liabilities. From an early age, I was told what success looked like: degrees from Wharton or Yale, internships at Goldman Sachs, a life measured in bonuses and board memberships. I tried. I really did. I got the grades, won the debates, joined Model UN. I did everything to be seen as St. James enough. But while my cousins studied equity portfolios, I found myself obsessing over design systems, user experience, and startups pitching wild ideas that no bank would ever touch. When I told Lorraine I wanted to study digital product design at Stanford, she blinked at me like I'd said I wanted to be a circus juggler. "Amber," she said, placing her crystal wine glass down with a soft clink. "Sweetheart, that's not a real degree." My father didn't say anything he never did when Lorraine had spoken first. His silence had always been his way of preserving peace. But I didn't want peace. I wanted purpose. At Stanford, I finally breathed. Surrounded by people who thought in wireframes and APIs instead of spreadsheets and trust funds, I came alive. I built a simple budgeting app as a sophomore-ete, went semi-viral on a niche financial blog, and got 40 downloads in 3 days. That rush, that was mine. No St. James money. No connections. Just my code. My idea. But back home, I was still the disappointment. The girl who'd walked away from a perfectly paved path and dared to build her own. Every summer, my family hosted a formal dinner at the family estate in Fairfield, Connecticut. It was as much performance as it was tradition, a chance for each member to declare their accomplishments for the year, like offerings to the altar of legacy. Lorraine loved these events. She'd rehearse lines with my younger half-brothers, making sure their college accolades were delivered with just enough humility to sound noble, but proud enough to get applause. For me, these dinners were slow-moving nightmares. Every year, the same seat, the same question. And what is Amber doing these days? And every year, I'd mutter something vague, and someone would cluck their tongue or pat my hand like I was on a sabbatical from real life. They didn't know I had turned down a 6-figure offer from a top design firm to co-found something I actually believed in. They didn't know I'd gone months without a paycheck, maxed out 2 credit cards, and slept under my desk more nights than I could count. All they knew was that I wasn't one of them. But that was about to change. The idea came to me, not in a flash of brilliance, but in the quiet hum of frustration. I had just wrapped another exhausting call with a potential investor who'd asked again if we had a real adult on the founding team. I was 25, female, and apparently too smiley to be taken seriously in fintech. My co-founder, Ravi, was a machine learning genius who barely spoke in meetings. We didn't have pedigree, just a prototype, and relentless resolve. We called it lattice, a financial security layer powered by AI that could detect suspicious account behavior before it became fraud. I knew both worlds: how corporate finance relied on archaic systems, and how fast tech was moving beneath them. We were building the bridge, but from the outside, no one cared because our last names didn't ring bells in the right boardrooms. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to spite them, but because I wasn't ready for another round of scoffs and polite concern. Instead, I told them I was freelancing, design consulting, I'd say, which was technically true if you considered building a multi-layered security protocol with 3 servers in my garage to be consulting. There were long weeks when I lived on granola bars and adrenaline. I sold my designer handbags on Poshmark to pay for cloud storage. My bedroom turned into a war zone of whiteboards, Ethernet cables, and half-filled coffee mugs. But I'd never felt more alive. Then came the break. Ravi's contact from an open-source encryption forum introduced us to Caleb Zhu, a rising star in venture capital circles with a reputation for backing unconventional founders. We met at a dive bar in Oakland. I pitched over fries and cheap beer, hands shaking, voice steady. "I'm not interested in fixing broken systems," I told him. "I want to replace them before they collapse." He laughed. "Finally, someone with fire." He wired us $2 million in seed funding the following week. That was the moment everything changed. We hired 5 engineers, moved out of my garage and into a converted co-working space in Soma, and began stress testing our platform with real user data. Our software caught 3 major fraud attempts during a closed pilot with a mid-sized regional bank. Word spread. By the time we entered Series A, Lattice was securing transactions for 6 financial institutions, including 2 international firms. I stopped using my full name on paperwork, opting for A. St. James, to avoid early detection. It wasn't shame, it was protection. Because deep down, I knew if the St. James family found out what I was doing before I was ready, they'd try to take it, fix it, reshape it until it fit their world. I couldn't let that happen. Not again. Ravi started calling me the ghost founder. Present everywhere, recognized nowhere. My photo didn't appear on our website. I skipped conferences, sent our CTO to receive awards. It wasn't time. Not yet. But inside, I was preparing for it, for the moment they'd know. Not for revenge, for truth. That moment was coming, and I could feel it like thunder rolling in the distance. The product was stable. Our revenue was up. We'd just closed a 20 million round, and then the email arrived. "We're doing a profile on disruptive female founders in fintech. Would you sit for a Fortune cover shoot?" I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then I wrote back, "Only if you use my full name." Because if I was going to shatter their illusion, I wanted them to see it clearly on every magazine rack in the country. When the embossed envelope from my father arrived, I already knew what it was. Every year, the St. James family dinner was a production part tradition, part corporate gala, part psychological test, held at our estate in Greenwich. It was where reputations were made, alliances strengthened, and disappointments quietly punished under the clink of crystal and dry compliments. This year, the invitation carried more than usual weight. "Amber, we expect your presence at the annual family dinner on the 12th. Formal attire, 7:30 p.m. sharp. Richard St. James. No love, no hope to see you. Just expectation." I stared at the card. It looked innocent enough, but I knew what it meant. Time was running out for me to fall back in line. I called Ravi. Are you really doing this? He asked. I have to, I replied. Before they find out on their own. He was quiet. Then, you sure you want them to know? I didn't answer, because the truth was I wasn't. Not entirely. The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of preparation. Not for the event, but for the aftermath. I met with my PR team to finalize the Fortune article. I reviewed the photographer's select zone with me looking out over the San Francisco skyline, one arms crossed by a whiteboard, and the one I chose. Me in a navy blue turtleneck, smiling just enough, with Amber St. James, the disruptor, in bold print across the top. It would hit shelves the day after the dinner. Perfect. I flew in the night before, rented a black sedan, instead of taking the car service my mother sent, and stayed in a boutique hotel downtown. I wanted distance. I wanted air. The morning of the dinner, I took a walk through Central Park, breathing in the sticky summer air. I wondered if they would recognize me, if my father would even look up when I entered the room. Probably not until the very end. When I arrived at the estate, Jenkins, our longtime butler, greeted me as if nothing had changed. Miss Amber, he said, taking my coat. The family is in the parlor. I paused in the foyer, letting my heels echo against the marble. Everything was the same. The oil paintings of ancestors glaring down from gilded frames, the smell of lemon polish and control. I stepped into the parlor. Amber, my stepmother Marlene said, her voice thin with polite surprise. You're early. She air-kissed both cheeks, examining my outfit understated, sleek, intentionally lacking any designer logo she'd recognize. My father barely turned from the fireplace. Still doing that software thing? He asked. It's going well, I replied calmly. We'll find you something more solid soon, he murmured, already done with the conversation. My cousin Davis was bragging about closing a hedge fund merger. My uncle was mocking tech bros with dreams but no discipline. My name floated in and out of side comments like I was a footnote. And then came Marlene's voice again, sharp, deliberate. Still, unemployed, darling? I smiled. Depends how you define work. She smirked. I define it as W-2s, clients, quarterly bonuses, not fantasy projects built in coffee shops. That was her opening jab. There would be more. But I let it slide. For now. Let them talk. Let them sneer. Tomorrow, the newsstands would talk louder. The dining room looked exactly as I remembered it. Long mahogany table, high-backed chairs, the chandelier glinting like judgment. Every place was assigned, of course. I was seated like always between Cousin Davis and Aunt Sylvia, the two people least likely to ask me anything real. Dinner began with polite chatter. Marlene praised Davis's latest acquisition. My father droned on about conservative market strategies. No one asked what I'd been doing. I didn't offer. The first real strike came with the salad course. So Amber, said Sylvia, stabbing a cherry tomato, any progress on that little app you were working on? I smiled tightly. Several, actually. Still not profitable? Marlene asked sweetly, sipping wine. Before I could answer, Davis jumped in. It's tough for tech startups. Most don't survive past Series A. That's why I stayed in finance. Laughter. I focused on my plate. It was always like this. The family didn't argue. They just delivered death by paper cuts, dismissive comments, offhand digs, and fake concern wrapped in napkin folds. By the time dessert was served, I'd been labeled unemployed, unfocused, the artistic one, which in this family was an insult. Then it happened. Jenkins entered the room holding a silver tray. Pardon the interruption, he said with his usual grace. But Mr. St. James requested immediate delivery of all new financial publications. He walked over and handed my father a copy of Fortune magazine, tomorrow's issue. Delivered early, thanks to my assistant. My father took it, barely looking up. Thank you, Jenkins. And then he turned it over. Silence. He froze mid-sentence. A full 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Marlene looked over his shoulder. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the plate. "What is this?" she whispered. Everyone turned. On the cover. Me, Amber St. James, standing in the Secure Flow office, arms crossed, confident. The headline blared. The billionaire who hacked Wall Street, Amber St. James, and the future of financial security. My father looked up, stunned. "Is this real?" "It is," I said softly. "That's my company. I built it 3 years ago." Davis blinked. "You're the founder of Secure Flow?" "Yes." Uncle Warren dropped his spoon. Marlene looked like she'd been slapped. "You own Secure Flow?" she repeated, breathless. "Majority stake?" I nodded. "We just closed a Series D round. Valuation just passed. 4.2 billion. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Aunt Sylvia let out a quiet, involuntary, "Oh my God." I glanced around the table, calm for the first time that night. They'd talked over me for years. Now they were silent. No one touched the dessert. For once, the St. James household, the shrine of polished composure and generational certainty, was silent. My father held the magazine in his hands like it was radioactive. "Your Secure Flow?" he asked again, his voice hoarse. "Yes," I said calmly. "I've been building it for 3 years." "But all this time," Aunt Sylvia whispered, her spoon trembling slightly, "you were unemployed." "I was invisible," I corrected. "There's a difference." Marlene leaned forward, voice brittle. This has to be a publicity stunt." I met her eyes. "No stunt. Check the SEC filings. We're preparing for IPO next spring." Uncle Warren finally spoke. "And no one knew?" I turned to him. "I didn't tell you because none of you ever asked about my work. Not really. You asked when I'd come to my senses, when I'd apply at Davis's firm, when I'd give up this phase. You didn't want to know me. You wanted to shape me." Davis leaned back in his chair, stunned. "But you're a billionaire?" "According to Forbes, yes. Though I'm more proud of our technology than the number." Grandfather Everett, silent until now, cleared his throat. "You've built something remarkable," he said. "Disrupted the very industry we ruled for decades." I nodded, heart pounding. "That's the idea. Financial security can't live in the past. The systems you built were strong, but not unbreakable. I saw the cracks." Marlene's voice turned cold. "And you waited until tonight, until we were all here to humiliate us." "No," I said. "I waited until I didn't need your approval to speak." My mother looked at me, her eyes glassy. "You should have told us." "Would you have listened?" I asked softly. She looked away. I stood, voice firm. "I didn't build Secure Flow to impress you. I built it because no one else would. Because I saw a problem that needed fixing, and I knew I could solve it." "Amber," my father began. "No," I interrupted, gently but clearly. "For years I sat at this table being mocked, diminished, laughed at. Tonight, I'm not asking for a seat. I'm taking it." The magazine lay in the center of the table, like a detonated truth bomb. My name. My photo. My victory. And still I felt no gloating, only release. After the dinner broke, the drawing room splintered into smaller conversations, some urgent, some awkwardly hushed. I wasn't left alone for long. First came my cousin Davis. He approached me near the grand piano, cheeks still flushed from the dinner table fallout. "You know," he said, "if you'd told me, I could have helped, made introductions." "You mean the way you helped me last year? By emailing me an unpaid internship like a favor?" He flinched. "Okay, that wasn't great, But still, we're family. That's the problem, I said gently. Family help always came with conditions. Then Uncle Warren pulled me aside. We should talk, he said, flipping through the Fortune magazine. There's opportunity here. A synergy. You have tech. We have legacy. A merger could. I smiled politely and cut him off. Secure Flow isn't for sale. Not to the St. James name. Not to anyone. You'd walk away from generational wealth? I didn't walk away, I said. I built my own. My mother found me in the study. She closed the door behind her with uncharacteristic softness. Her voice wavered. I didn't know. I always thought your dreams were temporary. I know, I said. But I also knew that if I waited for your permission, I'd never start. She looked at the magazine in her hands, like it was a photo album from a life she hadn't known existed. I told myself I was protecting you, that the world outside our legacy would break you. But it didn't, I whispered. It built me. Her hand trembled as it reached for mine. I'm proud of you, Amber, she said. I just wish I'd said that before the rest of the world did. And then came Marlene. She cornered me on the garden patio. The evening air was crisp, but her tone was colder. You planned this. I didn't control the magazine's delivery, I replied. You let us sit there, smug, clueless just to watch us squirm. No, Marlene. I let you sit there and speak for years without ever asking who I really was. You humiliated the family. I shook my head. No. I held up a mirror. You did the rest. She walked off without another word. Finally, Grandfather Everett beckoned me. He asked me to join him by the fireplace, just the two of us. You know, he began, your grandmother thinks this is all part of some Silicon Valley bubble. And you? I asked. He tapped the magazine. I think you're the first real innovator this family's had in 50 years. I was stunned. Even though I broke the mold? He smiled. Exactly because of it. He leaned forward. Amber, if you're willing, I'd like to visit your office. See what you've built. Not as a St. James shareholder. Just as your grandfather. My throat tightened. I nodded. I'd like that very much. The next morning, I woke up early. The estate was quiet too, quiet like the house itself was still digesting what had happened the night before. Downstairs, I found my father already in the library. The Fortune magazine lay open on the coffee table, his reading glasses perched on his nose, even though he never used to need them. He looked up, eyes tired. You're really not coming back to St. James Capital, are you? No, I said gently. I've already built what I was meant to build. He nodded slowly, then gestured for me to sit. I read every word of the article. Twice. I waited. I underestimated you, he admitted. We all did. I tried to make you into an asset for this family, but you became a force. There was a long silence. I won't ask you to fold Secure Flow into the family business, he added. But I will ask, can we learn from you? That caught me off guard. You mean collaborate? Collaborate? He repeated. On your terms? Later that day, I gathered the family again. Not for another dinner, but for an offer. I'm inviting you all to visit Secure Flow HQ, I said, standing at the same spot where I'd once been cornered with criticism. I want you to see what we've built. Meet the people. Understand the mission. Marlene raised an eyebrow. And then what? We write checks? Buy shares? I didn't flinch. No. Then you listen. That's all I'm asking. Grandfather Everett stood beside me. It's time we caught up, he said. To her. The following month, they came. Not all at once, not without awkward glances, but they came. In San Francisco, I walked them through the open floor office, filled with coders, analysts, and engineers. I showed them the security dashboard in real time, how we detect fraud and prevent financial disasters before they happen. My mother, for once, didn't correct my posture. My father stood next to the CTO and asked detailed questions about the neural net model. Even Stephanie took notes. At the end of the visit, Aunt Marlene approached Menno quite smiling, but not scowling either. "I still don't get half of what you do," she said. "But I can see it works. That's something." "I'll take it," I said. 6 months after that family dinner that changed everything, I hosted the first ever West Coast gathering of the Wakefield family at my San Francisco penthouse. Gone were the tuxedos, the cold formalities, the competitive recitations of who had landed what account. Instead, the space buzzed with a different kind of energy, open, curious, even warm. My father and grandfather stood near the full-length windows, discussing property value and tech real estate over sparkling water. My mother admired the modern art installations on my walls, and even Aunt Marlene asked the head of my cybersecurity team a surprisingly sharp question about blockchain. I watched them all, amazed. The people who once tried to box me into their mold now navigated my world tentatively, but respectfully. After dinner, farm to table, served family style, nothing like the silver-plated formality of Wakefield dinners past, Stephanie pulled me aside on the balcony. "You were right," she said softly, "about needing to do it differently." I smiled. "And you're doing it differently now too." She nodded. "Dad's letting me head a tech integration project. It's small, but it's mine." That meant more to me than she probably realized. Inside, I passed the digital display wall, a global system monitoring live transactions across continents. Blips of light flickered on the map, like constellations. "That's beautiful," my mother said, standing behind me. "It's safety," I replied. "That's how I see it." The Wakefield name now stood for more than just old money and tradition. It stood for adaptation, evolution. And I had become the bridge between what it was and what it could be. Not everyone changed. Aunt Marlene still made her snide remarks in hushed tones, and some family members clearly thought I'd gotten lucky. But I no longer needed their full approval. I'd built something real, something mine. The fortune cover now sat framed in my office, but I didn't look at it often. What mattered more were the faces around me that finally saw Menno as the failure, the disappointment, or the tech-obsessed, lost Wakefield, but as Amber Wakefield, founder, CEO, innovator, and daughter. As I stood by the window watching the city lights shimmer, I thought of everyone out there still being underestimated by their own families, still being told their dreams were just distractions. To them, I'd say this: you don't need permission to build your future. You just need belief, especially in yourself.